Hey guys, I'm Emily from the Blue Mouse, and today I'm going to show you how to make this nice textured cup cozy. It's really easy and perfect for beginners. It just involves the knit and purl stitches and knowing how to cast on and bind off, but I'm going to show you how to do all of that, including seaming it together in this video. So to make this cup cozy, you're going to need a pair of knitting needles, some yarn, scissors, and a yarn needle. I'm using worsted weight yarn, and I'm using Lion Brand's Woolies yarn and size US 9 or 5.5 millimeter needles. But for this pattern, you could use any yarn and any pair of needles that you like. Just find some yarn and needles that work well together and give you a nice drape and just a nice texture that you like. And you're going to do a 4-row repeat for your swatch, the first 2 rows being a knit 1, purl 1 repeat, and the last 2 rows being a purl 1, knit 1 repeat. So just make a test swatch and figure out how many stitches makes up 3 inches, and that's how many you're going to cast on. Make sure that you cast on a multiple of 2. If you end up with an odd number for your swatch, then you can round up or round down to make it even. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to do a long tail cast on. If you already know how to do this, you can just skip to this time code for the next step. But for those of you that want to learn how to do it, you take your yarn and you stretch out a length long enough to weave in as a tail later, and then you put that over your needle. So here we're going to estimate how much yarn you need. This is based on how many stitches you need to cast on. So I need to cast on 14, so I'm going to wrap it around 14 times around my needle to figure out how long of a tail I need. Alright, that's 14 times, so I just pinch the yarn at the end and pull it off my needle. So this is how long of a tail I need to cast on that many stitches and still have enough yarn to weave in later. So I put it over my needle, and this is the part that's attached to your ball of yarn, and this is attached to your tail. So I pinch the end with my fingers on my left hand like this, and then you've got this kind of loop here. So you're going to put your index finger and your thumb in that loop and spread it like that, and then you're going to twist it so that your thumb creates this kind of loop here. It doesn't look like a loop from this angle, but you can tell from above that it is a loop. And I kind of hold it in position on my needle with my other finger. So what you're going to do is take your needle and go through that loop by your thumb, and then with your index finger, you wrap the yarn around from underneath and over, and then you pull that loop through your thumb loop. Then release your thumb and pull it taut, and then you just do that again. So you bring your needle through your thumb loop, yarn over, pull that yarn over through your thumb loop, release your thumb and pull it a little bit tight. You don't want to pull it too tightly. Then you go through that thumb loop again, yarn over, pull through the thumb loop, release, and every time you're just bringing your thumb back down here to create that thumb loop again. So go through the thumb loop, yarn over, pull through, release, and when you release, you're pulling it tight with that same strand that your thumb is wrapped around. So through that thumb loop, yarn over, pull through, and then you release and you go down to that same strand and pull with your thumb again. And you're just going to keep doing that until you have as many stitches as you need. So I'm casting on 14, so I'm just going to keep doing this until I have 14 stitches. So there you have it. You've cast on your right amount of stitches and you're ready to start on your first row. Alright, so just turn your work. And with a long tail cast on, the first row is usually a wrong side row. At least that's the way that I like to do it, because I think this side looks much cleaner than this side. So I say that this is my wrong side and this is my right side. So my first row is a wrong side row. And to make seaming easier, at the end, I'm going to do 1 row of purling. So I'm going to purl every stitch on this row before starting on my moss stitch. So how you purl is you bring your yarn to the front like this, and then you go in this way into the front loop of your first stitch, like this. Then you bring your yarn over the front and through the back, and I like to hold my thumb here like this, and you're going to pull that yarn over through your stitch. So you pull it through. You can use your index finger to help you. Then you can slide it off. Then you go the same direction into your next stitch. Then you bring the yarn again over the front and down to the back. Pull that yarn over through. You can slide that off. Again, go into the front loop. Yarn over the front to the back. Pull that loop through and slide off. And that is how you purl. So you just keep going into the front loop, yarn over front to the back, pull through, slide off, into the front, yarn over front to the back, pull through, slide off. And you just keep doing that for your first row. Alright, so we finished our row, and now we can turn our work. Bring the yarn to the back. See, this edge looks so much cleaner than this one does. So this is my right side row. So now that I've done one setup row, I'm ready to start on my moss stitch. So this is a 4-row repeat. In the first row, you're going to knit 1, then purl 1, and repeat that. So knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, all the way across. So you start out with your first stitch, and you're going to go into the front loop and to the back, and you're creating this kind of X. So you're only going in the front loop of this stitch, not both of them. See how this stitch has 2 loops here? You're only going in the front one. So you go in the front, you bring the yarn up over your needle in the front and down to the back, pull a loop through and slide off, and now you're going to switch to a purl stitch. So you bring your yarn between your needles to the front, and you're going to purl like you did on the first row. So you go in this way into your needle, into your stitch, and only into the front loop. Then bring your yarn up over the front to the back, pull through, and pull up a loop, and then you can slide that off of your left hand needle. So your yarn's still in the front, but you need to do a knit stitch next. So you put your yarn between both your needles to the back, and then you take your right hand needle and put it in the front loop of the first stitch on your left hand needle. Bring the yarn over like this, and you always go from underneath to the back. Pull up a loop and slide off. And now we're going to do a purl stitch. So you bring your yarn between your needles to the front, go into that first stitch like this, bring your yarn up over the front to the back, pull a loop through, and then you can slide off. And you're just going to repeat that. So you're going to knit 1, slide the yarn to the front, purl 1, slide the yarn to the back, knit 1, slide the yarn to the front, purl 1, and just keep doing that all the way to the end of your row, ending on a purl stitch. So here I've reached my last 2 stitches. I'm going to knit the second to last one and purl the last one. So that is the first repeat row of the moss stitch. So then you turn your work, and you're going to do the exact same thing for the second row. So you start out with a knit 1, and then do a purl stitch, and you repeat that all the way through. So you start out with a knit 1, bring your yarn through the front loop, yarn over, pull a loop through and slide off, bring the yarn to the front, go into the stitch this way, yarn over and pull up a loop. Move the yarn to the back, knit 1, move the yarn to the front and purl 1, and just keep alternating all the way to the end of the row. And you're going to end on a purl stitch. Alright, so my last stitch, like I said, is a purl, so bring your yarn to the front, go in like this, yarn over the front and pull a loop through and slide off. So you're halfway through with your repeats, and now we're going to switch it up a little bit. For your third row, you're going to start out with a purl 1, then a knit 1, and repeat that. This is your third repeat row, but your fourth actual row, including that first purl every stitch row. So you bring your yarn to the front, you go into the front loop of that first stitch, as if to purl. Yarn over the front, pull a loop through, slide off. Move the yarn to the back, go into that front loop, yarn over and pull a loop through, slide off. And that's it. You just repeat that for the rest of your row. Bring your yarn to the front, insert in this way, yarn over front to back, pull up a loop, slide off. And you're just going to repeat this. Alright, and you're going to end on a knit stitch. So again, go through the front loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you can slide that off. So you've finished your third repeat row. Turn your work, and you're going to do the exact same thing. So start with a purl one, and then do a knit stitch. So go into that front loop, yarn over front to back, pull up a loop, slide off, move the yarn to the back, go into that front loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, slide off, move the yarn to the front, and repeat. Alright, so we end on a knit one. Going to turn your work, and you just repeat those 4 rows. So you do 2 rows of knit 1, purl 1 repeat, and then you do 2 rows after that of a purl 1, knit 1 repeat. And then you just repeat those 4 rows until you have approximately 7 inches. And you want to make sure that your work can stretch a little bit so that it's not too loose on the coffee cup. Alright, so here I have an almost finished one. All I have left to do is bind off. So this is a right side facing row, and that's where I'm going to bind off. You can tell by going to your cast on edge, and if it has this pretty edge and an extra set of knit stitches down here, then you know that this is your right side versus the bumpiness of this one. That is your wrong side. So if you already know how to bind off, you can skip to this time code for seaming. Alright, so this is very similar to just plain old knitting. So you're basically just going to knit 2 and then pull that first stitch over the second and off, therefore binding off a stitch. So start out by knitting 2, go into that front loop, yarn over and pull through, slide off, into that front loop, yarn over, pull through, and slide off. So I have these 2 stitches over here, and you're going to take your left hand needle and go into this second one here. You're going to pull it over the first one and off your needle, and you're going to repeat that. So knit 1, then pull that first stitch over the second one and off your needle, then knit 1, go into that first stitch, pull over and off, knit 1, go into that first stitch, pull it over and off your needle, and you're just going to repeat that for the rest of your row. And if you find that you're doing this too tightly, you can either knit more loosely or use a size or 2 larger knitting needles. So here I have my last loop. I'm just going to pull it out a little bit, then take my scissors. I'm going to cut a pretty long tail, probably about 3 or 4 times the width of this for seaming. And then you take that tail and you pull it through your last stitch. And then you just pull it tight. And there you have your nearly finished cup cozy. All that's left to do is to seam it together. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to seam your cozy together. So here is my right side. I'm just going to flip that over so the wrong side is facing me. They look virtually the same other than your cast on and your bind off edge. You just fold your pieces over like this. And this is my cast on tail, and this is my bind off edge. So I'm just going to thread my bind off tail through my yarn needle, and then I go through the corner of the other side. So you're not going in through a stitch yet. You're just going through a corner. So now our pieces are connected, and now we can go into the first stitch. So I'm not going to go into my edge stitch, which would be like this right here, because that's why you just attach the corners, to avoid that. So I'm going into the second one. So if you look at your bind off edge, you have all these V's here. Each one is a stitch. So this little nub right here would be your edge stitch. So you go to the one right next to it, which is this one, and you find the stitch that goes into it. And the stitch should have 2 bars. you put your needle underneath both bars. There's a bar here and a bar here. You just put your needle underneath both of them and pull through. And I think the bind off edge is a little bit easier to see than the cast on edge, but you can still easily find it. So the cast on edge also has these little loops that make up stitches. So you just kind of line yours up, and your edge cast on stitch is down here by your corner, which you've already gone through. So you don't need to go through that one. You go through the one right next to it, which would be this right here. So you find the stitch that corresponds to it, which would be this one. So you can see the V that makes up that stitch. You put your needle under both bars of it and pull through. And they should kind of line up so you can kind of tell which goes with which. But then you go to the other side and you find the next stitch, which would be this one right here. And you find the stitch that goes with it, which are these two bars right here. And you can see that your last stitch was right here, so you're just moving over one to the next one. Put your needle under both bars of that and pull through. Then you go back to the other side. We've already gone through this stitch, so we move one over and we find the two bars that make up that stitch, which is this right here. Put your needle under both and pull through. So basically you're just alternating. You go back to the other side, you find the next stitch, which is this one. Might be a little bit harder to see because it's a purl stitch, but there are two bars here nonetheless. So you just put your needle under both of them and pull through. Go back to the other side and just keep going back and forth like that. Alright, so I've gone to the end and I've got these bars here. So I'm just going to pull tight on my tail until that closes. And because it's connected to my last stitch, you won't pull that piece of yarn out. It'll just bunch up like this. And then you can just pull it apart. And you have your seam. It's not completely invisible, but it does look nice and clean. So you just weave in your ends and you're all good to go.